you're going to get blown out of the water. It's like a kayak going down the rapids.
Okay, so we're going live right now, and I'm gonna show you we're live on StreamYard. I think I'm gonna come sit by you, Will, because then it'll make
Okay.
it easier for us to broadcast and to across 15. Yeah, that'll look better. Well, because then I can't do it across.
Okay.
Okay, and I just wanted to talk with you about your journey. Well, I feel like it's a testimony, and I feel like it's important for us to share stuff that we've been through and issues that we've how do we encountered when we were incarcerated, so that we can raise awareness and that we can be shedding light to those.
I don't have a problem with that.
Okay, so we are going to be talking to for anonymity purposes. Did I say that right?
Yes.
Okay, we were gonna call, his name is Hope, and that's who I will refer to, and just to keep his identity safe, and I would never want anybody to think that it's okay to like reach out to somebody on our podcast that hasn't given permission. So we just want to protect our people. And for that reason, we're going to call him Hope. If anybody jumps on and wants to ask questions, we would appreciate that. And we're going to begin now. If you hear some chickens, we're going to show you where we're at. It's really, I didn't know why I picked here. Those chickens are out. Isn't that one out?
Yes.
See? Well, there's a wild chicken on the loose, but okay. Okay, so first I will start off by maybe what would you like to share with us, or what would your purpose be of sharing your testimony with us?
Well, I think the most important thing is to realize that life in many aspects is very complicated. At any particular time, we try to make the best decisions that we can. Sometimes some decisions are better than others. We can always find fault with everybody and everything that is in life. What I've found out over a period of time, after spending 32 years in prison, is that there are many really fine people that go to prison. A lot of honest people have integrity, and you also have the other environmental problems. But on the streets, if everybody that was bad is in prison, then where are they coming from? One of the things I think that's very important is the reason I'm speaking today is about WINGS program. It's about helping especially young people who have got themselves in difficulties and trying to change their behavior, and so that they can have a better quality of life. Our problem is because there's a lot of people that do not want them to change. And in their own selfishness, maybe they're not aware of it. They don't want them to have a better quality of life. In WINGS, which is I've been involved for about 6 years now, the choices that are being made, young people learning how to make substitutions in behavior. It's basically about getting rid of the garbage in your life. Okay? It's about getting rid of the garbage in your life. People get the wrong idea that you can incarcerate persons and they remove the garbage in their life because they're in prison. That's not true. A person cannot be in prison and never want to change their quality of life.
I like your dog. Thank you.
One of the things in WINGS, they're encouraging people to change their lives. Now, we're not talking just about kids. We're also talking about parents. We're talking about society in general. We're talking about all elements of everything from police to prisons, whatever it may be. It's important that people have the right understanding of what actually prisons do. Now, I don't have a lot of complaints about those years. The sad point is, I saw so many people have such great potential, and they never could make the change And so when they step out into the world, this world in recidivism, people keep strikes against them and not aware of that they themselves wouldn't want the strikes. For an example, when a person leaves a prison, they need an actual functional ID, not a prison ID, because it means nothing. So when a person leaves prison, if they're going to go into any special programming, they need that help lined up before they get out. I know people that have tried to get their Social Security, and I'm one of them. And I had support so I could do something. How many people can't get Social Security? How many people can't get a driver's license? How many people can't cash a check? Even if they've been working and they're paid, they go down to the bank, there's a problem. So until there are those changes are made, how can we make changes in society? Young people, now in facts and figures, when they start saying that one person in 3 from an incarcerated family are going to be in prison. Now that's a frightening statement. But the question is why? The question is, why is that happening? I've known 3, 4 generations of people that were in prison and the bitterness that was going on. And it never helped anyone. It never helped anyone. So until people are honest and have integrity in all aspects, but you and I both know that when a person comes out of prison, if they're having a tough time finding a job, or they're being placed right back into the environment in which they took their fall, we call the crime, or they feel that during that time they were incarcerated, they lost their connection with their families. And there's some men that have no connections because they have had problems with their families. So one of the things that people in the community can do is to really take a good look and see, how do we help change the behavior? Disciplining a person without change, it doesn't happen. I mean, if it happens, then I'm amazed, but it does not happen. The person has to be willing to make the change. So you have to provide the avenue for them to change. I've known men and women in prison that went through all these programs, and yet when they get out of prison, those programs meant nothing. They have 3 or 4 programs they have to go to. They're traveling all over the city. They're trying to make all the time levels, everything. And you know something? When are they supposed to work? So what if they're doing in prison is not meaningful, then they cannot relate. When a person, for example, in voting, if every citizen in this country had the legal right to vote, that's very important. You have a voice. But when you get out of prison and you don't have a right to vote, there's several things happen. Number one, they're telling you you're not a worthy citizen. Now, they want you to change. They want you to contribute. They want you to pay taxes. They want you to do all these things. But unless you have the avenues and to make it work, the chances of success become very diminished. Now, the reason I agreed to this today is because I'm really encouraging the community to have an opportunity to speak and have oversight in prisons and jails. I've been in a jail before that was condemned, and yet it was publicly acclaimed, supported. Well, why was it condemned? It was a health hazard to the community, and yet a blind side was provided because it was a jail.
And because they were for prisoners, probably.
Same thing.
Yeah.
So, but yet those same people had visits with people on the outside. I know for a fact, I brought up to the attention, why is this condemned? You're working here, and officer, you're taking possibility diseases home to your family. The next day we had paint. We had things to scrub the showers.
Wow.
Just because that awareness.
Because of for the officers, yeah.
That's it. Because they have families, and we both know that there are people on both sides of the fence who are officers. Um, we would prefer them to be the best professional they can. I come from the standpoint that if you're going to prison, you're supposed to be the most perfect person you can in your own heart. That's right, in your own heart. You don't have to prove to anyone, you don't have to do anything, but you have to do it yourself. And if we can have the families, family visits have changed in the state of New Mexico in the prison system.
Oh my gosh, so dramatically they gotta be.
In 1985, when I fell, they had conjugal visits. I was in prison 7 years before I got married. The fact is that men who are still establishing their families and the connections, if they're being released, they have that possibility of returning to be a recovering citizen. But if you isolate a man or a woman, please tell me, how does that help in community relations? It doesn't. So over a period of time, they have lost this. Okay? When I first felt, families were sending in things, food during Christmas and so on. So some people misbehave. Well, when we're in prison, we don't say, hey, you screw up, you affect my visit, you affect my life, I like you a lot. No, it's just the other way around. You don't screw with my visits, you don't screw with my life, because we're in a closed environment. And yet, they have done away with the programming. When I first fell, it was a couple of years after the riot. And programming was high, education was high. People didn't have what they misunderstood. They were given just so many days a month. Those were earned times. Those were not a free gift. You earn that by your behavior, by your programming. But when you take that away, what is the incentive? Even on the streets, what is the incentive if you don't get a paycheck? Am I right or wrong?
Yeah, you're right.
I mean, that's what it comes down to. There's no single answer, but it's a point where it's piece by piece of improvement. Not only a system, but also society, and then reward. I've never knew a kid that ever quit school because of lack of intelligence. I've seen kids have difficulties, but it was almost always on social problems. And if that is part of that, it's called mental health.
Yeah.
Well, I hope the little bit of things I've said, there's so many things, of course, I could talk about. But really, I'm encouraging people to participate in the WINGS program. Mothers, fathers, young men, young women, children. For the fact is, there is an opportunity of support from somebody that wants to help them with change in their life, to have quality of life. If people are not involved, you know who wins? The bad guys.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, the
It's
bad
true,
guys,
yeah.
because the worst part of society somehow gyrates to this oppression, this evil, this ugliness. And if you belong to a program like WINGS and your child has had problems, you can come and sit down and work with people who are encouraging them to make changes and helping you to find ways to make those changes. I could talk for days, but there's many things I would like to say, and I'll answer any questions. And I don't, I shot a person. I take responsibility, but not everybody knows the circumstances, because I kept my mouth shut.
That's
'Cause
what
I
we
didn't
do.
want people-
Oh, that's what we do.
I know,
I know that's the thing that trips me out.
but I did.
Yeah.
I did. And so I would, anytime that, I'm one of those people, I'm very strong against drive-bys. And the reason is because they have a total disregard for society. who's ever in that house. I mean, think about that. Total babies, grandmothers, sons, all about what? Going to get even with somebody? Well, that's not mano to mano for
They
sure.
should fight. Yeah, I feel like, yeah, you know, like
Okay.
back in the days it was fist fighting. Like, you know, I feel like that drive by is kind of like a chicken shit way out. Do you like, you know what I mean?
No, I do.
But to them, it's gangs send out little peewees out there to try to earn their stripes because they don't have the balls to go do those kinds of things. Do you know what I mean? And I don't think that that's right, the right kind of mentality. You know what I mean? That's not
First
that's
of
not
all,
an honorable thing.
let's be realistic. You can be a group of people and call yourself a gang or an association. And actually, in this life, you don't own anything. You can claim anything you want. And you want to say that you're an organization. Well, there are other organizations that have a lot more people with a lot bigger guns.
Yeah.
And you want to start
And
with
those
the
are
police,
the
sheriffs, everything like that.
the Navy, the Army.
Hey, let me tell you,
I feel like those are the biggest kind of
those are
organized gangs, right? You
there
know,
are
like,
times that they're like that. And we see in a world problem today with between Russia and the Ukrainians. But we want young people to at least see an opportunity for a quality of life.
Yes,
And it's one person at a time.
it is.
You're
It
not going to
is.
change. You're not going to
You're
go
right.
out and get everybody. It's one person at a time. And so Wings is providing that opportunity, one person at a time. And if there's 50 people show up or 5 people show up, the goal is the same.
Mhm.
One person at a time. And some mothers, they have been locked into some circumstances for so many years. They are passing indirectly that same type of behavior or attitude to their children. And it's not helping their children because that's not the type of love I understand. And fathers, let me tell you, fathers who are bullies in their homes, they're open their door to somebody else bully them. If it's righteous for you to behave that way, to beat your wife, then it should be righteous for people to come anytime they want to beat you, no matter who they may be, because it's only righteous and fair. Am I right?
Yeah, because he's taking fact the woman's vulnerable than him, smaller, less than, like, you know, a man's size is twice of a woman's, anyways, you know.
But what is his heart? The
It's not
question
there.
is, the question is, how does a mother and father teach a young person how to live from their heart? When you have a dysfunctional family that passes on and pass it on and
Oh,
pass it
that's
on,
hard.
you know, we can criticize them, we can say all the ugly things in the world, but the fact is, there's got that kid in that family should have a chance to have a better life. And people who want them to continue in the same thing, every time you hear a siren, you're afraid because they're coming after you. Your kids see that.
Mhm.
And kids, a lot of them become so numb. And they lose their touch with their heart. And you know what they think with? Raw emotions. And I'm not preaching. I'm simply saying in an observation. So that's why I'd be willing to have done this for Wings, because I believe in what you're doing. And I've seen it work. I've seen it work in the prisons. I've seen the connection back to families. And for every family that makes it, to me, that's what's important.
That's right.
I'm not that important. They are more important. Well, I hope this helps you to some degree.
I wanted to ask you, Osi, do you remember your intake process whenever you got, do you know what I mean? Well, because you were in county for a certain amount of time, and I'm sure that you ran into people that said, okay, you're going to go to prison, it's going to be like this, da 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 da. It wasn't like that for you, because that's how it was for me. So I had a girlfriend, and she was like, it's going to be so and so, and they're going to do this, and it's just like a process. But I was just curious, because the men are way different. You guys get sent to a holding, right?
Well, let's put it this way. we're all, the common thing is when we walk in the door, it's called paperwork.
Yeah.
Okay? And it depends upon what they're going to do in paperwork. Some people are put in immediate isolation because of being suicidal or whatever it may be,
Right.
are totally incorrigible.
Right.
In other words, some people are put into
They're not
general
physically-
populations. Yes, I had many men talk to me, but one of the important things for me, men have always been honest with me because that's one of the things I expect. Don't expect me to be honest with you if you're a liar and you're a cheat. You know, in prison, we always thought, you know, you lie, cheat, or steal, you face the steel. That's a cruel, cruel perception. But if society on the outside had that understanding, you wouldn't have people running stop signs, stop lights, putting everybody else's lights and life in danger. Now, for me, when I first went in, it was quite a shock. And I immediately went into population. And I found out that most of the men who had been in prison, most of them were very reasonable, forthright persons. Because remember, if they lie to me and I face them in prison, the relationship is at stress, right?
Yeah.
So the most important thing was being straight up. Now, some guys, I never had a man, and I will tell you this straight up, glorified prison. Not one person in 32 years glorified prison. So there must be something about going to prison is not being happy. But I've known people who said, oh man, my old man went to prison, or my father went to prison, and so on. So that was an experience they had. The question is, what is the experience you had? And I will say this too. Look, society is under war, especially the young people because of drugs.
Oh, it's so scary.
It is scary. And I do not have an answer. I do not have an answer, and I don't propose an answer. All I know is that every kid that doesn't take drugs has a better percentage chance to have a better quality of life.
That's right.
All right?
That's right.
It's just another tag that you have to deal with, because if you're dealing with the drugs, you're dealing with a mind situation, you're dealing with an environmental situation, you're dealing with a cultural situation. So that person that encourages you to take the dope, that's not your friend.
That's right.
That is not your friend, because a friend would say, hey,
No, don't do that, man. Yeah.
because this is the road it's going to go down to. And I had men in prison, real good friends. I mean, and they would use their drugs and they would say, OC, pray for me. and I would, of course. And the fact is that I understood that was a part of life. But you know something? They didn't cheat anybody. They weren't lying. They were doing their business. And they were a small businessman in prison.
Yeah.
Am I right?
Yeah.
But if they sold drugs that were better quality, I'd have to respect them as a business person and all those things. So the fact is, when we and our young people today, somewhere we're missing this perception. Having a good time means you have to use a support system like drugs. But I'm going to talk the same thing about sex. I'm telling you straight up. I mean, it's pretty tough to tell a kid who's 15 and 16 years of age they're not a young man. I mean, that's part of reality. The question is, what are you going to do with your manhood? I've had guys who say, well, this RUCA, we did this, that RUCA, we did that. And I would say, well, when are you going to invite your daughter or your mother into your game? And they'd say, oh, see, wait a minute, that's not right. And I would say, wait a minute, it was all right for somebody else's daughter or somebody else's mother, but it's not good enough for you. And guys would look at me but we understood. It was just pointing out, look, you didn't have to take advantage of another human being. And what did it get you?
Yeah.
And what did it get them in the long run of so many years? And I just think that the young people today have a terrible, terrible time. And I only wish that they didn't have to go through that. But you know something they need to? They need to make decisions. They need to make a decision about picking up the gun. The gun is a control agent, right?
Yes, it is.
You don't use a gun, you don't have a gun unless you intend to use it, if that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah.
And so people who put guns in the hands of people who are not trained, I mean really trained, not just saying, well, I'll go out and shoot this thing, really trained about what it means to go to a funeral home and see a dead body. Kids who drive up and down the streets, street racing, they're putting other people at danger.
I know, it's so dangerous.
The question is, why? Why? That's where I always come from, the why of it. Who, when, what, and why. Well, I'm open to try to give you any statements that I can.
Some destinations won't get comments. This says something about maybe I'm not getting a comment because I'm not streaming.
Okay, well, I was just wanting to talk with you for a little bit. We'll probably have another time that I would like to meet with you whenever. You can bring Carol too, it's cool. I just think your story is very interesting, and I'm very honored that I can be able to share it through this and to be able to have you in our Wings family, because like I say, if it weren't for people in the community embracing me, I wouldn't have nobody. You know what I mean? And I'm grateful for that,
You're
because
welcome.
I have not had family, and people coming out of incarceration, usually 99% of the, like 90% of the time, that's the case. You're the 10%. You had Carol, you probably had people in the community that were even supporting you or were like saying, you can do this, you got this, you know what I mean? For some of us out here, that's not the case, and I just want it to bring light to those situations, because it's hard, you know?
One of the things I found out was, though, I did not know the justice system. I did not know. You know, when we talk about honesty and integrity, the system itself, the purpose of the system is good. It is the people who participate in the system on both sides. When I first took a fall, I was told I was going to have this many years, and this is when I said, well, I can do that. Then all of a sudden, they changed the rules.
What?
Oh, yeah. Then they changed the rules again, and the rules again. So it first started out in a life sentence. It incorporated so many years, so much with your JNS. But all of a sudden, they had a different interpretation about a lifer. Then it went up 30 years before you're eligible for parole. Eligible for parole.
Wow.
People said, wait a minute,
Wow.
this means an indefinite sentence.
Yeah.
An indefinite sentence in the state of New Mexico was to be illegal.
Yeah.
But people turned the blind eye. Because I do understand, really I do. But the problem is the constant change, the constant change, the constant change. And so here you had men who had worked very hard in prison to change their life, then be told, oh, we're not going to give you parole. And I know so many men like that.
That's quite crazy.
But I also saw a few people stand up to the fact is, if you're going to ask people to change, then you have to have the flexibility for that change. Because if you want violence, if a man escaped from prison, the biggest thing that we would not want them to do is harm somebody else. Period.
Yes.
We don't want other people harmed. And yet we're in a situation that what the desperation for some people to leave. I had a warden tell me the most great risk for them was a 25 to 26-year-old white male. Okay? Because their life was in such trauma
turmoil.
And a lot of them were only 6 to 7 months of getting out.
Wow.
So the point was, it was mental health. It was their insecurities. They did not know what they were going to do in their life. And so that type of confusion. If you have a man who gets out of prison and you know he's going to have a job, you know that he has to be expected. He knows that he will help take care of his children or his family and so on, to reconcile with whatever it may be.
Mhm.
That man has a purpose. When a man has a right to vote and he votes his heart and his conscience, like any other citizen, he becomes responsible. And therefore, they have a connection to community. Now, the law is being changed now that this is becoming possible. And by doing that, you realize that becomes part of the parole process.
That's
I
cool.
will tell you this. The night that I got out of prison, I called my wife. She told me she was picking me up the next day. What? They hadn't done any paperwork. It's not because they didn't have some people that I believe that were very effective. It's because there was no connection between the prison system and the parole system, making sure the parole system had all these things done for a person before they got out of prison. Therefore, the function of a probation parole officer was more effective if these things would have been done.
Yeah.
When my parole officer found out I didn't need food stamps, but I should have been on that program
Yes.
of a public assistance, it hadn't been done. All these things had not been done. Now, I'm just a typical case.
Yes.
Now, think how many times that times thousands. Am I right?
Yes.
Okay. And so I saw firsthand incompetence, deliberate incompetence. And this is not just my story. For years now,
Oh yeah.
I've heard the same story.
Oh yeah. The caseworkers are.
But you see, I don't accept that. You go into prison, they want a birth certificate, right? If you have a birth certificate, that's clarification, isn't it? So then why is it difficult to file for Social Security in prison? I was told because I didn't file when I was 65, I would be penalized on amounts of monies. I could not file because it had been
Wow.
against the law.
Wow. And they couldn't waive that or anything
No.
because of that. I feel like that's an extenuating circumstance, right? You're like a 1 in a million that would happen to. Do you know what I mean? And
But
it's not your fault.
But it shouldn't have happened.
You should have been able to file from prison.
I looked at, well, that's right. And I said to the lady and the gentleman once, you wanted me to violate the law and I'm in prison and you don't want me to violate the law. And
But you want me to violate the law.
Yeah. And therefore, but they said that's the law and there's nothing we can do to change it. That's that type of inflexibility that a lot of people who become incarcerated face. For women, not having enough halfway house programs, taking in consideration everything about family, whatever it may be, it's very, very tough. You think it's tough for guys getting jobs. It's really much more difficult for women getting jobs because a lot of them are not trained in professions and trained in professions when they're in prison. I've seen, and I mean by seen, not saw, programs that were for that purpose totally done away with over the years. I've been in a prison where men had to pay for men to come in and to teach them how to become electricians and plumbers. Now think about this.
Men had to pay.
They had to pay in order to do that, and yet where's that money going in the prison system?
That's
What's it going for?
programming. The prison should provide that.
I saw that happen, and then I saw the transition take place. And yet people don't want to pay for prisons. I don't want to pay for prisons. I don't want to pay for jails. I want to pay, you know what I want to pay for? I want to pay for a child and a mother and a father having a smile on their family face, going out into the community, enjoying the quality of life that is available.
Yes.
That's what I want to pay for.
Yeah, me too.
But if you're in a system and you have 70% failure, why are you getting the money for 70% failure?
Thank you.
All right?
That's right.
If your product is failing all the time, then why are you getting the money for it? Now, I guess, like I said, I'll back away and I'll
No,
leave
you're
that
fine.
alone.
No, you can go there. It's fine. It's fine. You
But
can
it's
go
really
there.
true.
It is.
I just don't understand that. You don't pay for kids to go to school to fail. You pay for schools for kids to succeed.
That's right.
And when schools that have not been doing the job, you wind up having charter schools
Or
to do
Montessori's
to do the job.
Yeah.
And you're thinking, wait a minute, if they can do the job, why is it the same people who are being trained to do the job can't do the job? Something in perspective is wrong.
Yes, I agree. I agree. I feel like there needs to be more mental health things because a lot of the thing that bugs me when I was incarcerated, I seen a lot of mental health, like people that didn't need to be there, like literally, like they were mental cases. And because society or the judge didn't want to deal with that, they just throw them and incarcerate them. And like, that's serious. They just need mental help, they need medication. They need, you know what I mean? Some type of chemical imbalance in their brain is not happening and they need help. But the justice system has not, for years and years and years, overlooked the mental health capacity of that angle and just like, oh, just send them to jail. Who cares? And then when they get to the prisons, those are some of the hardest cases or the ones that they're most difficult. You know what I mean? They cause a lot of problems. They're very disruptive because they don't know how to live. They're just literally looking for help. And it's very mostly sad, because if they would have gotten some type of medication or help, they probably wouldn't have even committed the crimes that they have. Or they needed a place to stay, or it's winter time, hey, let's go to jail because we don't have nowhere else, the streets are cold, like things like that. It's very sad.
I'll give you a best example. A mother goes to prison. She's had difficulties in her whole life. Who's going to take care of the child? The person you have to take care of the child, you have to be able to really trust them. But if they're dysfunctional, they pass that dysfunctional on to them. And a lot of it's just not mental health, it's social behavior health. I've seen the program where inexperienced people that came out of Santa Fe down to Central, they set up a mental health program. I saw it work. I saw people behaving. I saw all these things. And you know what happens? It became part of a program control. They were there and they vegetated. And they call that mental health. And it's not, and I'm not putting the people down there running the program, but when you had federal funds, your programs were different. But when it comes to the state funds, it doesn't quite work that way. When it costs so much to keep a person in prison, how much of that money is being provided to get them out of the prisons, to get them being reintegrated into society? That is the perfection. I've been part of things where they said, we have this program, this program, this program. How many do you have in the program? 6. What? I mean, the problem is you're getting all the money. Why are you getting only 6? I saw cases where men worked hard to get extra time removed from their sentence because of behavior.
That's so hard.
But I saw it work. And then I saw it come back where they didn't keep their agreement. They wouldn't want to put it in writing that this was the agreement between them and the man. Well, ask yourself, you're in prison, how do you trust the person who's responsible for you if that becomes a practice? Because that becomes part of the lie, becomes part of the cheat. And this thing is, like I said, it's not simple. There is a complicated thing. But why is it But why is it that money is spent unwise? When you have a facility, and I've seen a facility so dirty compared to a facility that has been so clean. And I don't know a man, I'm going to tell you this, I don't know a man that likes to live in puke. I'm sorry, but it's true. Because there's certain thing about fear of disease, whatever it may be. Right?
Yep.
So there's a lot of in what I say, it's not equal on both sides. The fact is, you're not going to win it all. And you're not going to win every situation. But that's why I said the word hope. I believe in hope. I've seen men change. I've seen women change. I've seen families change. I've seen people that have a heart who will go to church and truly believe. They don't, you don't find God in church. I didn't find God in church. I already knew God. But that may not always develop in circumstances. But when you see a family, the children go in and they run to their father or run to their mother and hug them. And that man is trying so hard to change his life to be for those children. That is what it is about. And when they walk out, you know that they have a chance, and those children have a chance. So I'll leave it at that. And if there's any questions, I'll be more than glad to try to help you.
Okay, thank you. That was great, OC. That was very great.